Also, I didn't know you went on Oprah. I learned that today. What was the gap between you denouncing your faith and then going on Oprah?
It was pretty quick. I was on her show twice actually. Um, but so so I kept preaching. I was a hypocrite. I have to admit it. I don't know who to confess to, but I was a hypocrite for about 4 months. I kept preaching because I had a calendar, right? I knew at that moment that I didn't believe anymore, but I was good at it, and so I kept. It was really weird. I knew I had to stop, but I was in the pulpit preaching these things that I didn't believe anymore. And by the way, there's a lot of people like that. I know a lot of pastors right now who are in the pulpit who now don't believe, and they're trying to find an exit strategy. And a lot of them are members of the clergy project. So anyway, I finally left in December of that year, and in January of '84, I wrote a letter to everybody telling them that I don't believe anymore, and I'm not, don't invite me to preach. And I started buying some books. I found a book called "Woe to the Women, the Bible Tells Me So." I wrote to the Freedom from Religion Foundation, which published the book. And I thanked him. Thanks for writing that book. And Ann Gaylor, the president, wrote me back and said, "Why don't you write us your story, Preacher to Atheist?" Well, Oprah Winfrey had just come to Chicago, and Ann Gaylor knew Oprah Winfrey because she and her daughter Annie Laurie were on her show in Baltimore, and so Oprah used their tape to audition for her Chicago show. It was called AM Chicago. So she said, "I want to do a show about atheism. Do you know anybody that has a story who used to believe?" So Ann said, "Yeah, this guy in California, Dan Barker." And so the producers called me, and I flew out to Chicago. And Oprah was kind of known then, but she wasn't like a big name, but she was kind of known. It was later that she became national. And then later I was on her national show too on another topic. So they flew me out there, and that day, that was in September of '84. It was only like, what, 9 months since I had stopped preaching, and I never talked publicly about it. And here I was on public television, and I had knowingly met some other atheists for the first time. That was Ann and her daughter, Annie Laurie, and a former Catholic named Rita Bell. And I was Oprah was asking me these questions, and you can see if you wanna look at it online, that show's still available. You can Google Oprah Barker gay one of those things, you can find it. And, you can see on the show that I'm struggling for the very first time to put those thoughts into words because I had never done that. I didn't prepare any speech, and, today it all just flows out naturally, but at the time, you can see I was just this young thinker, and, it was also the first time that I'd spoke before a hostile audience. Oprah's producers had packed that audience with a whole bunch of Bible thumpers. They had their Bibles. They were there, to combat the devil. They knew there was gonna be atheists on the stage, and, I loved that. I thought that was great. They a lot of them hated me, and I thought, "This is great," because now I'm finally saying something that's getting an honest response out of an audience. You kinda wonder when you're a pastor, are they really honest, or are they just there because they're in your church and, "Yes, amen, brother." And so I never look back. I just think that's pretty amazing. Also, Ann Gaylor's daughter, Annie Laurie, was on the show. The 2 of them had started the Freedom from Religion Foundation, and Annie Laurie and I met that day on that show, and we're later married. Annie Laurie and I just celebrated our 38th anniversary.
Oh,
So
wow.
look at the video of the day we met on Oprah Winfrey's show.
Wow. So anytime people ask you how you guys met, you say Oprah and they don't believe you at first, I imagine.
Well, yeah, it's true. That's how we actually physically met.
Yeah.
We would have met because I was invited to the convention a month later, and we knew each other through mail, but we would have met. But that was the first day, actually. That was the first time we actually met.
Wow. Wait, did the producers tell you that the audience was gonna be hostile? Did they tell you that at all? Did you just find out once you were there?
No, they didn't tell me. And I think that made for great TV. You know what I mean? It made a real good dynamic. I think that was cool. Um, there were some non-believers in the audience, but you know, the Christians with their Bibles, they were real aggressive. They were calling Annie Laurie a witch. All was that kind of stuff, you know.